Glory to the Empire. Our hero, no, our protagonist, Darius. He left his homeland of Britannia to enroll in the Imperial military. After 25 years service, those who enroll will become Imperial citizens, along with all those so coveted perks. He's already spent 4 years and he has 21 long years to go. Winter 1089, the Hulsen Folk Rebellion. It took almost a year to capture Hulsen Folk, and then in a matter of months, a rebellion started. Sure enough, Darius and his unit were sent in. The Imperials had made the mistake of filling the city with artillery for future campaigns. This they would pay for. On paper, this should be an easy siege for the well-equipped and well-trained Imperial forces. But the rebels, they had courage. This was their homeland, and they had firepower. This first assault was a disaster. Every siege tower and battleground had been destroyed, but the lords pushed the men on, up the ladders. At the top of the ladder was a bloody brawl. When you jumped down off the final rung of the ladder, you were jumping on corpses. The bleached stone was turning red. The Imperials had got a foothold on the walls, and now they had to carve their way into the city. These rebels, these civilians, were no match for the well-trained Imperial forces, but still they kept coming. They wouldn't let go of their home in a hurry to Imperial rule. The Imperials were in the city streets. The city had been looted once. This time would be worse. What soldiers still remained were sensing the defeat imminently, and they began to flee into the city. Darius, when the red faded, put down his sword. The rebellion was over. With winter almost over and a successful crushing of the rebellion, there was a tournament held at Ficaion. Both Darius and his greatest friend, Yorig the Fish, would enter. The first round, unlucky to the draw, Yorig would face off against Darius. Yorig was mounted, Darius was on foot. Against two foes, Darius gets taken down in the first round. Yorig continues on to the second, and then on to the third. To Darius' surprise, Yorig makes it all the way to the final. Yorig was all over him, but after a clean blow to Yorig's head, he bit the dust. Spring 1090, and for the first time in a long time since the fracturing of the Empire, there was no war declared. The Empress decided to use this time to send all the soldiers into the countryside to help with farming and construction, to no doubtly boost the economy for future wars whilst they could. Let's see what they're wearing. To Darius, a thick leather kite shield, an iron spatha he's had for some time, and a helmet he won. Basic bronze shoulder pauldrons, some studded armour, some vambraces, some splint boots, and of course his sumpter horse was little good than pulling a cart. Yorig had a spatha, not as good as Darius's, and he had a splintered, tatty kite shield. He also had leathered armour, but it wasn't studded, and a similar horse. They both needed improvements, but for now they would rest up and offer their services in the village of Trinopis until the banners are raised again. They'd both be here in the village of Trinopis for some time. They had to oversee construction, help where they could, especially with farming, and most importantly, build relations with the people. These were official orders. not usual orders, but the Empress Rhaegar herself wanted to build relations with the people of the Southern Empire. One of the locals had a little house for them to stay in. It was quite pleasant, on top of the hill. This would be their home for the next couple of months at least. It was pleasant, but there wasn't much to do. Darius was no farmer, or builder, or blacksmith. Sure, he could help, and he knew what he was doing, but Darius had hands of a soldier. The day the banners were raised again couldn't come soon enough. Each morning would start the same. He'd take a breath of fresh air and look out over the small village he was occupying. He would spend most of the day overseeing construction and helping the farmers in the fields. There seemed to be almost no crime in this village. The people were set in their ways, and besides, most young men were either moved to the city or were in the army. A lot of the villagers took a while to warm to Darius and Yorick, but they would come around. At least some people enjoyed their presence. Yorick would spend most of the day with the village bookkeeper, discussing about what they could export to the nearest city and what they could keep for themselves. The friendship between Darius and Yorick grew even further. Not only were they brothers in arms, but they were true friends. And every evening as the sun was setting, they would share a drink and then return back to their house on the hill. Sometime early summer is when Yorick came running over to Darius, and Darius knew exactly what it was. The banners were raised. The army was mustering. They packed their weapons and armour, and away they rode. Before they head directly back to ficaion, they had to spread the word that the mustering had begun, and all soldiers had to report back. Before continuing their journey, they would buy some supplies and water their horses. Only half a day's ride from the city. They could have made it all the way, but they decided to spend one last night with freedom rather than being cooped up in a cramped barracks. Whilst Yorick was gathering more firewood, a couple of brigands approached Darius. One of the brigands attacked Darius almost immediately, savagely. Darius fought him off, managed to bash him back with his shield and get to his horse. Darius couldn't get far though. Another horseman came out of nowhere and started charging Darius. He called for Yorick's help. And of course, Yorick came. There was 4 left, but hardly a match for Darius and Yorick. Darius and Yorick were all too happy to be back at the city. This is where most of the armies would muster for the next campaign. Where they were going they did not know. But what they did know is that a tournament was being held to celebrate the new campaign, and Yorick and Darius would enter. The first games Yorick and Darius were separated, and Darius was on a horse for the first time in a competition. He did pretty good, but eventually his horse was taken down. They both made it to the second round, and they would face off, both of them on horse. Darius got the better of Yorick and moved on to the next bout. He put a hefty wager on himself. Darius had won in front of all the mustering soldiers. He felt good. He won a cataphrax lance, which he sold. To celebrate, him and all the other soldiers went to the local taverns and drank themselves silly before the campaign would begin. It was safe to say they were all very excited. The Empress Rhaegar had declared war on the Khazaits to everyone's surprise, and then shortly after, the city of Lycaon raised a rebellion. 2 problems, 1 solution. Before the armies marched east, they would sort out a rebellion here in Ficaion. It didn't take long to claim victory over Ficaion and squash the rebellion, but everyone was asking why. Why did Ficaion rise up? Some say it was the other empires trying to cause unrest, but some people think it was internal, lords trying to undermine the empress. Eyes now focusing east, the soldiers marched towards the Khazate territories. Their target was Akasir Castle. The siege had gone on for some days, and Yorick and Darius were a part of the 3rd or 4th wave, and by the time they reached the top of the ladder, the sound of fighting began to die. There was not much action here for them to see, except for the dying corpses of their foe. But word was spreading quickly that they were to use their momentum to go further into Khazate territory, towards the city of Akalat. But by the time they reached the gates, a treaty had been made, and as quick as the war began, it had ended, and peace was again between the Khazates and the Southern Empire. Darius and Yorick took this opportunity for the first time to explore this Khazate city. They'd never been this far east, either of them. It was interesting to them. The armour and the weaponry was much different to what they were used to. Yorick, of course from the north, had Sturgeon blood, and Darius had Battanian. Still, the city had the same problems, of poor and homeless, a divide between the lower classes and the upper, the rich merchants and the lords and ladies. But still, they had many different things here. The craftsmanship was completely different. The pottery, the woodwork, the food, the smells, the incenses. It was intoxicating. But still they had to stay on their toes. After all, not days ago, they were enemies. As they were going through the market, Darius had a large hit of nostalgia. He saw an old Battanian helm. Where it came from, he wouldn't ask the merchant. But it reminded him of home, of times long past. And Yorick could tell. It hit hard. You shouldn't linger in the city for too long. After all, The soldiers did well to avoid their gaze, but Yurig insisted that they stay at the inn for one night before they headed back to the Imperial territory. They wiped their feet on the way in. It was a completely different tavern to what they're used to, but the vibe was the same. No chairs. Interesting, he thought, but it looked comfortable and welcoming. Not many people really spoke to Yurig or Darius, but they were able to relax here. The music was strange but interesting, enjoyable, and the food and drink was tasty and delightful. Darius decided not to get too intoxicated though. They had a long ride the next day. He made his way upstairs, found a bedroll, and ended his day. Another day towards his goal of 25 years service in the Imperial Army. The next morning they were all but eager to get back west. The beautiful countryside, the flat lands horses craved so much on their hooves. And so, they rode. The two warriors, the two friends, the two soldiers of the Imperial Army were heading to Anira, the city of Anira, where they would muster for the next campaign. Thank you for joining in the third chapter of this 25-year service of Darius. What happens next I don't know, as the future is completely random, but I will keep going along this path so Darius can experience the wars, the friendships, and the conflict to come. Thank you for watching. Enjoy and keep an eye out for the next one. Glory to the Empire.